The free speech debate is nothing new, but its form has changed dramatically in the online era. The evolution of the internet has been so rapid and its impact so vast that both the legal system and society at large are still struggling to make sense of it all. Over the years, many world governments have trended toward greater oversight, restricting the distribution of material now deemed illegal. However, not too long ago, the web felt more like the Wild West. Almost anything could be posted anywhere. Our subject today may well be the turning point, the spark that caused its shift from lawless playground into another regulated service. This is the story of Violentacrez, a bastion of free speech, or the epitome of everything wrong online, depending on who you ask. If you're interested in interacting with the Knight community, I highly encourage you to join the Discord in the description. If social media is more your speed, I also have Twitter and Instagram linked below. Check it out. On June 23rd of 2005, Reddit launched, the self-proclaimed front page of the internet. The site is essentially a forum, albeit an enormous one. Knowing a little bit about how it works is crucial to understanding how its most notorious user became such a big part of its identity. Its subforums, or subreddits, and all of the content on them are user-generated. Anyone signed up to Reddit can create their own subreddit. In the early days, restrictions were minimal, meaning you could make a space dedicated to almost anything. Most are pretty barren and obscure, with few, if any, active participants, while some have achieved staggering popularity. The majority of large subreddits were, and still are, about the kind of stuff you'd expect. Gaming, movies, sports, and so on. But when anything goes on a platform, inevitably, questionable people will crawl out of the woodwork to stake their claim to a part of it. Some of the communities made cater to a dubious crowd that gained a surprising amount of traction. By the way, I found it super difficult to find a break in the video, but before we go any further, I just wanted to pause for a moment and let you know to keep going. Around this time of year, at least in the States, it's very transitional for many. You're going back to school, you've moved into a new place, you're pursuing higher education, etc., etc. While there might be uncertainty that lies ahead, you are a very capable person and you will persevere. Just keep going and give it your all. Particularly infamous was r/jailbait, a corner of Reddit dedicated to posting images of underage girls. Now, Reddit did have some rules, and mercifully, the distribution of CP was among those few things that were prohibited. For its users, the allure of r/jailbait was that it skirted as close to the line of legality as it could, while still catering to their gross interest. Its contributors would share images of scantily clad teenagers to gain approval among their community, and essentially for karma, which is points that just add to a meaningless scorecard. The less dressed these minors were, the better the responses would be. Its core audience was happy to lay their cards on the table. Their sexual attraction to teenagers, particularly young teens, was out in the open. In their echo chamber, though, it wasn't just accepted, but also encouraged. For a while, they were left to their own devices, because Reddit is, for the most part, managed by its users. With a self-moderated community of like-minded individuals, there's no one with any motive to object. The Redditor behind r/jailbait was our subject, Violentacrez, who'd started the sub because of his personal fixation on young girls. Violentacrez was generally porn-obsessed and created many other fetish-focused boards in his time. r/jailbait was his breakout hit, to put it lightly. Though it had a relatively small 200,000 subscribers at its peak, it was getting millions of page views per month. For a time, the search term jailbait was second in the list of terms driving traffic to the site. It's uncomfortable to consider, but this suggests that for every contributor to the subreddit, there were a ton of lurkers who weren't willing to engage, but were drawn to the content. Its active members were beyond willing to supply them what they were looking for, and Violentacrez himself was no exception. Violentacrez was personally responsible for hundreds of posts, and like the others on r/jailbait, the minors in his were unaware their pictures were being shared online. In the majority of cases, the images were stolen from children's Facebook pages. Others were leaked, and some were original content taken without the consent of those whose privacy they were violating. To many, this violation was a part of the appeal. For a bunch of child predators, the jailbait community was shockingly discerning Anything that didn't meet their specific criteria was hit with a wave of disapproval. Violentacrez was particular too. He and his fellow moderators would remove any content that appeared or was confirmed to feature a girl over the age of 17. It seems strange to call this quality control, but to him, that's exactly what it was. In fairness, they'd also remove any content that seemed to show a preteen. Whether this was to protect his subreddit, because preteens were one of the few things Violentacrez wasn't into, or that he was just a stickler for his own rules, we aren't sure. Regardless, his followers wouldn't have been pleased to see anyone that young in the feed. One thing they were constantly vocal about was the claim that they aren't pedophiles. Grade school children being fair game would have undermined their defense somewhat. Instead, jailbait users would describe themselves as hebophiles, or ephebophiles. The former denotes an attraction to children between the ages of 11 and 14, while the latter age range is 15 to 19. Though the laws regarding sex offenses do tend to be on a sliding scale, where the higher the age, the less severe an offense is considered to be, the value of these categorizations is debated in academia, as studies show that people with an attraction to one underage group are likely to have an attraction to others. In the case of ephebophilia, things get a little muddier, since its range reaches adulthood, but it's not relevant here since the reason for the subreddit's existence was to ogle girls below the legal age. So, Violentacrez was in considerable company, in a self-made group devoted to leering at kids. While r/jailbait was his claim to fame on Reddit, it was one of many objectionable contributions he had made. Violentacrez was responsible for the creation of over 100 subreddits, and was a moderator on several hundred more. Those that made the biggest impact were those that caused the greatest offense. Among them were pages dedicated to incest, rape, racism, anti-Semitism, and second only to jailbait in notoriety is r/deadkids. The last one was exactly what you would expect, given its title. Over time, Violentacrez' efforts to offend would begin to take an unintended toll. In August of 2011, as part of his trolling efforts, he created a post on r/women, which featured a graphic image of a partially clothed woman being brutally beaten by a large man. This caused outrage that spread beyond the enthusiastic membership and reached a wider audience. The reaction and the fierce debate about freedoms it sparked carried the post straight to the front page. For Violentacrez, this seems to have been the point. His online infamy was the closest thing he'd ever had to relevance. He enjoyed courting controversy and harvesting as much karma as he could, and reveled in stirring up the debate about whether or not he had the right to share the things that he did. Things took another downturn in November of that same year when an r/jailbait user called The Contortionist posted censored pictures he claimed to be of his then 14-year-old ex-girlfriend. He later shared uncensored images after countless requests from those in the thread. With an irrefutable case of CP having been distributed there, r/jailbait was temporarily taken down. In spite of the scrutiny, Reddit's general manager, Eric Martin, defended the decision to allow jailbait content on Reddit. There's stuff on there that's extremely offensive and reprehensible, but we're not an editorial site. If something's legal, we don't touch it. On February 13th of 2012, r/jailbait was shut down for good as part of a broader ban on suggestive or content featuring minors. A change Reddit's public statement suggests they were reluctant to enact. We do not make this policy change lightly, or without careful deliberation. The shift in policy came after a Reddit user going by Archangel D. Workin began Project Panda, a community effort to draw the public's attention to the problem of sexualized content featuring children, and after Anderson Cooper used his TV platform to blast r/jailbait and Violentacrez specifically. However, Violentacrez wasn't the only one sowing the seeds of Reddit's demise. The change to Reddit's rules may have taken down the poster boy and caused the removal of subreddits that overtly posted jailbait, but it didn't eradicate the problem. Enter r/creepshots. Creepshots was dedicated to voyeuristic imagery, a core tenet being the subject must be unaware that images of them were being taken. Though not a requirement, many of the images were of underage girls once again, but it was one particular user who spelt trouble for online predators. He went by the name of Weaglude and was a frequent peruser of r/creepshots and occasionally posted his own stalker-esque images. What made him different to others in r/creepshots is that Weagle was a teacher. In a stroke of bad luck for the self-confessed creep, a student from his school happened upon a post featuring a classmate that he recognized. This student left a comment promising to get him fired, a promise he made good on. Violentacrez was brought in to moderate on r/creepshots after the story about the teacher caused an uproar which reached mainstream press. But with its newfound notoriety, it was too shut down in September of 2012. Soon after, Violentacrez would learn a couple of lessons more valuable than any amount of unspendable karma. If you delight in riling people up, you paint a target on your back. If you're a terrible person, your friends won't always be your friends forever. In October of 2012, Violentacrez received a message via GChat. It seems like you're not super careful about keeping your identity under wraps. This message came from journalist Adrien Chen. Alarm bells began to ring for Violentacrez. "Have you been given my real name?" the internet troll asked. "Yeah," the journalist replied. "That's not good." Violentacrez was right. This was bad news for him and his cult following. What came after was a call between Chen and Micheal Brutsch, the self-proclaimed creepy uncle of Reddit. Micheal went from being a Spartan behind the keyboard to a coward on the phone. "My wife is disabled. I got a home and a mortgage, and if this hits the fan, I believe this will affect negatively on my employment. I do my job, go home, watch TV, and go on the internet. I just like riling people up in my spare time." For someone compelled to invade the privacy of high school girls, he seemed to value his own more than he had any right to. His disabled wife, Dani, it turns out, knew exactly what he was doing and was aware of his porn addiction. She was active on Reddit herself, under the companion name Not So Violentacrez. Her engagement there was very different though. She founded and ran the r/fibromyalgia subreddit and seemed content to stay there, while her husband posted gore and pornography in bed beside her. In the conversation with Chen, Brutsch suggested his son, Seamus, would be similarly apathetic. "He won't really care. He thinks I'm creepy as it is." In truth, his son seemed to admire his father, going as far to support Michael's apparent encounter with his 19-year-old stepdaughter in an AMA. Michael's behaviors were supported by the people closest to him, so his double life didn't seem to be a secret at home. Likewise, at public Reddit events, he was happy to lap up the attention his online presence afforded him. It was this openness among his peers that led to his identity being leaked. Chen had been given his name by a former friend, who felt Brutsch had taken his shtick too far. With appeals to Chen's sympathy having failed, he turned to groveling. "I'm like a spy who's found out. I'll do anything. If you want me to stop posting, delete whatever I posted, whatever. I'm at your mercy because I really can't think of anything worse that could possibly happen. It's not like I do anything illegal." Technically, Brutsch was right. The jailbait, while morally reprehensible, didn't constitute CP by its legal definition. Similarly, content featuring violence and gore isn't restricted by US law, providing the content isn't seen to promote terrorists or their organizations. The freedom to post graphic imagery online can be important. It's instrumental in documenting Russian war crimes in Ukraine, for example. It's context, rather than content, that made much of what Brutsch had been posting problematic. He persistently used freedom of speech to excuse his deliberate attempts to inflame and disgust. This made him a champion to those on Reddit who felt that any restriction of speech was a threat to freedom at large, even in cases where these same people were repulsed by what he had posted. The situation isn't that simple though. In daily life, exercising freedom of speech usually entails taking ownership of what you say. Reddit prides itself on ensuring the privacy of its users, though its commitment to privacy stops there, which means those who want to post objectionable content can do so behind a veil of anonymity. Freedom of speech was never meant to mean freedom of consequence, but in the online era, the two are often considered interlinked. In the United States, there's not much you can't say online provided it doesn't intersect with other laws. You can't sincerely threaten someone's life or falsely advertise, for example. The US having relatively few restrictions means you can have deplorable takes on deplorable subjects, and can share many kinds of graphic material with no legal repercussions for doing so. However, if an employer wants to disassociate themselves from these things, it's legitimate grounds for them to terminate your employment. Pictures of dead kids aren't good optics, and cash is king. If your trolling is going to cost your employer money, they're going to throw you under the bus at a moment's notice. And that's exactly what happened to Brutsch. After Chen's article went live on gawker.com, Micheal's employer, First Cash, was quick to give him the axe. He deleted the Violentacrez account, but it didn't stop the troll from getting a taste of unwanted attention once his identity was public knowledge. He didn't seem to be a fan, as evidenced by signs on his front door that were intended to keep the press at bay. The sudden spread of awareness put Reddit and the site's small team of employees under a great deal of scrutiny. What wouldn't be apparent until after the situation blew up is that Reddit staff had a personal relationship with Violentacrez. With their blessing, he had been the de facto moderator for the not safe for work side of Reddit. He was described as effective at keeping illegal content off the site, and had been known to show other moderators the ropes. Violentacrez was even given a one-of-a-kind pimp hat icon, which doesn't seem like a damning indictment of his, in their words, extremely offensive and reprehensible content. But it didn't matter that the people running the show were reluctant to remove the invasive material. The floodgates were already open. Suddenly, there was a laser focus on any and all Reddit content featuring minors, and increased scrutiny targeting other potentially harmful subreddits. This set in motion a fierce debate about what should or should not be protected speech that led to a large contingent of Redditors leaping into Micheal Brutsch's defense. Some went so far as to send him donations and buy his low-effort merch as signs of support. In an ironic twist, many of the hardcore free speech crowd chose to ban the Gawker article on their subreddits, claiming that it breached Reddit's terms regarding user anonymity. There's a chance that they probably would have felt different if he were a 13-year-old girl, though. The storm that descended upon them as a result of their most recognizable figure being outed led to a greater level of control, with the domino effect eventually leading to the removal of other controversial subreddits. A week after his unwanted reveal, Micheal Brutsch took part in an interview with CNN, where he tried to play off Violentacrez as a character, limply pretended to regret some of his actions.
I would be very mad at you, and I understand that. And all I can say is that, you know, I'm sorry.
And used Britney Spears to excuse his obsession with young girls. His reasons for doing what he did were ridiculous.
Michael, I still don't understand, really.
Yes.
Why you did this at all. Why you kept pushing the envelope.
It had a reward. I'm like the monkey in the, you know, the monkey that pushes the button and gets the food pellet. It's addictive.
Briefly, he reappeared on Reddit under another name, but that account was gone before long. Now, Micheal lives in Hope, Arkansas. He and his wife appear to be doing quite well for themselves. They're still running their own business, Brutsch Consulting Inc., and live in rather pleasant surroundings. As the saying goes, though, old habits seem to die hard. Violentacrez is still online and sharing images taken without consent. It's just that these days, they're of bugs in his garden. Before we hop into the end segment, I would like to have the patron scroll. Obviously, you don't have to do this, but thank you for supporting my weird little videos on the internet. It honestly means so much to me. Thank you all. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the video, why not like and subscribe? It definitely helps me out. If you didn't though, why not dislike? And let me know what I can improve on for next time. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you on the next one.